Hello, everyone. I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Webinars. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, AR Success in 2020, Trends, Technology, and Talent. I would like to thank our webinar partner today, Esker, whose strong commitment to thought leadership in the Treasury, Finance, AR, and AP professions helps us make this webinar possible today. Accounts receivable deserves to be a strategic focus in 2020 at all companies. Companies that invest in AR done right impact the P2P efficiency of their customers while lowering DSO, bad debt write-offs, and improving working capital management. Today, you will discover how companies are leveraging new technology, emerging best practices, and the right talent to improve their AR processes, the productivity of their teams through workflow automation, and taking more control of how and when they get paid. Before we delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury Webinars, cover a few housekeeping items, and then cover our learning objectives as they offer the pillars of my value proposition to you for investing an hour of your valuable time with us today. At Treasury Webinars, we offer webinars designed to empower Treasury, accounts payable, and accounts receivable success at companies of all sizes across all industries. We only do what we do best, which is virtual events. Now for the exciting housekeeping items. For those of you interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions, remain online for the duration of the webinar, and answer all the questions in our post-webinar survey, which will launch immediately following the webinar. If you have any questions regarding CTP credit or would like a copy of today's presentation deck, please send an email to ernie@treasurywebinars.com. Again, that's ernie@treasurywebinars.com. I'd love to hear from you today. I can take your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. Time permitting, we'll have a Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. If I don't get to your questions, I'll follow up with you directly after the webinar. Finally, I appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. Now, our learning objectives. After the webinar, you'll be able to identify specific opportunities to mitigate AR processing costs at your company, identify specific opportunities to improve customer relationships and productivity across the enterprise at your company, and identify specific opportunities to increase cash flow and to reduce bad debt write-offs and DSO at your company. So let's start things on a little bit of a 20,000-foot altitude here. So really what we're looking to do in accounts receivable is add strategic value and impact the bottom line. So let's start by taking a quick look at some of the CFO priorities, and then we'll talk about how AR done right helps our CFO deliver value as well to the company bottom line. And so I like this graphic here. I like this because we're going out to 2021 here. And the number one we see is consistent from 2018 now to what people are thinking in 2021, and that's performance management. You have growth strategy, we have organization human capital, we have cash management, and we have process optimization. So I've been involved in CFO research for several years, and consistently what we'll see at the top is we'll see growth strategy. And what we've seen over the past, I would say 5 to 10 years, is more of a focus on performance management and also organization and human capital. And so I'm happy to see that we have cash management here. I believe what we're going to see going forward is more CFOs understand the value of extremely successful blocking and tackling. We'll start to see cash management and process optimization creep up. Really the point I'd like to make here is that all of these areas really support that growth strategy. And so at the end of the day, we are trying to fuel high margin growth. And that's something where AR can play a critical role. And so we'll talk much more about this, but I think that's good to kind of set the stage. And what we want to do is we want to see how AR success aligns with CFO success, which aligns with our company success. So I've had the opportunity to speak with CFOs at roundtables across the country for many years, Treasury professionals, AR professionals, and one thing that I constantly hear is that we don't have strategic alignment. And so that strategic alignment needs to start within the accounts receivable department, go across the enterprise, and go all the way up to that C-suite, and we'll talk about that as well. So let's talk about how we deliver AR success. So I'm going to really give you the punchline first. I think it's really important for us that offer thought leadership, and we really give people specific advice on how to do things. So usually when you look at AR success, someone would say, these are the 10 things that AR success is, and I like to say, how do we achieve AR success? So let's take a little bit of a different angle, and I'm going to take this angle across the office of the CFO this year. So how do you deliver accounts receivable success? first you need to define what AR success is at your company. And so the first thing we need to do is we need to take a harsh look in the mirror and look at our AR processes. And as we do that, as we get that visibility, we'll start to identify opportunities for improvement. But in defining AR success, I think we need to look at some benchmarks. So we need to look at some benchmarks across industries, people that have similar flows to us, but we also need to look at how our performance is going over time. So we really need to define the AR success and make sure that aligns with the strategic objectives of our company. And then we need to understand the skills of our AR team. Do we have the right skill set in our team to deliver on our key strategic priorities? And so one of the things we don't hear often is how do we assess those skill sets, right? And then how do we fill those gaps in your AR team? Because I believe what we're seeing is the skill sets are needing to change a little bit. So as we start to leverage automation and AI, the success that we need from our team is less of a tactical matter and more of a strategic level, analytical acumen, and to be able to communicate with impact. And so we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about how to identify your technology gaps and assess your technology needs versus your wants. And what I do find is that when we start to look at pain points and opportunities for improvement, really technology is really the fuel for the best practices that we'll talk about. So we need to take a look at what technology exists at your companies and what type of investments that you'll likely need to make, but also how to win that business case. And then part of that, identifying that technology gap, is to understand your current systems. And so if you've never been in the weeds, from accounts payable all the way to supplier onboarding, all the way until that money gets out the door and leaves our bank account, it's really fascinating how many systems and people and processes there are. So again, that first step is to really have that in-depth mapping and look at all the people involved, and you really start to see areas of opportunity. Again, with anything in the office of the CFO, excellence in blocking and tackling is all about visibility. And so those are the first 5 things I would say. And then I think we need to understand the time spent on non-value add activities. So when I do CFO research and AR leader research, what I find is that when we ask folks how much time they're spending on value add activities, that number is normally 20% or less. And so we really need to have an understanding of how much time is quite honestly being wasted right now. And so sometimes people have a fear of automation and AR. Really, the opportunity that brings is that can give people more of their day back. So it's not like we want to reduce headcount. It's that we want to make sure that we are giving our folks more time to do analytical activities. And so really you need to assess where you are, right? Where you want to go and how you're going to get there. The first thing where you'll start to see some eye-opening things is time spent on non-value-add activities, especially when you look at your AR team, your collections team, how much time is on the phone. And what you'll start to see is a lot of those drivers of time spent on non-value activities are eliminated with a simple investment in technologies or just teaching folks how to communicate effectively. You need to assess your current relationship with your internal AR customers, and so your treasury folks, right, anyone involved in that AR process, especially your sales team, right? We can't look at our sales team as our adversary. So a lot of times we see friction between sales and AR and treasury, but we all need to understand that we impact the customer experience. If we go back to our CFO objectives, what we will see in CFO research is their main objectives are customer satisfaction and customer engagement, building more business through those customers. So in AR, we need to be more cognizant of the communications that we have with our customers. We don't want to create friction with our customers, so we need to be very careful and be more mindful and make sure there's a specific action that we want. So we can't just send out a bunch of emails. We can't be terse. We have to be consistent, and we have to value every interaction with our customers. And we need to inform our sales colleagues. They need to understand all the communications that are happening, and likewise, sales needs to really work with AR and communicate. So that's a whole customer relationship. It's not just in that sales silo. It's not in that AR silo. It's not in that collections. It's not in that dispute management. We have to collaborate effectively. And then, as I just mentioned, we need to understand the impact of our actions on customer relationships, because the last thing that we want to do is cause that friction. We can damage those relationships. One of the things that happened to me when I was in manufacturing, we were holding orders because cash application hadn't happened. That's kind of the worst case scenario, but we need to all get on the same page and communicate effectively. And then in AR, we need to collaborate with Treasury to take more control of those payments. And so as we build those better relationships, we'll be able to take control of the types of payments that we want. We want those electronic payments. We want that remittance detail. And really what happens is AP done on our side really facilitates AR done on our side really facilitates AP efficiency on their side. So there's win-win. And at the end of the day, we need to invest in relationships. And this is something that has not been talked about, which I'm going to talk about a lot more in 2020. We need to invest in relationships. So internally in AR, we need to invest in those productive relationships, make sure we're all on the same page. We all have accountability for the same metrics, customer satisfaction, lowering dispute times, number of disputes. And then externally, we need to be more mindful of the impact we have on our customer service and also our service providers. So if we are engaging an AR automation service provider, we need to make sure that we are a good customer and maximize the value that they have. So in the last few years, I've seen companies that invest in technology in AR, but they really don't get the most out of that investment because they don't really understand the value that it can offer. And sometimes their providers are more a transaction than a relationship. So we need to make sure that you understand what AR done right looks like. And if you're going to invest in technology, that AR should help you really address all of your pain points. And you should really be able to build a business case. Really, the business case often makes itself. So this is really going to be the top line roadmap for the rest of the presentation. How do you deliver accounts receivable success? As I mentioned earlier, and one of the things you want to do is, if you haven't done this already, you want to evaluate your AR process, the overarching process, which is made up of many processes. Those of you that haven't done this, maybe you're a treasurer or CFO, believe me, it will be eye-opening. I had the opportunity to do this when I worked in Treasury, and I really have gotten myself really a lot into the weeds the last really 4 to 5 years. So really, so let's just kind of take this at a really high level. If this is pretty basic for you, I apologize, but especially if you're in Treasury, this will help you have the conversations that you need to have with your AR colleagues. So what we want to do is we want to take control of that cash conversion cycle. And so part of that, obviously, is taking control of that OTC part of that and being able to collaborate. So if they don't report up through us, how do we work with them to create a win situation for the company, but also a win for AR in terms of their value to the company as well? And so there's some great content here that I like from Esker. So they're our thought leadership partner today. So there's even more in-depth diagrams here. So I really like to dig into the weeds a little bit. So I apologize if I'm going too far into the weeds. But the good news is, if you want a copy of the slides, please let me know. And so here's what I like. So the whole process, we have credit management, order fulfillment, billing, collections, dispute management, and cash applications. So, you know, if you're not in the weeds, you're probably saying, wow, there's an awful lot going on there. And so there's people, processes, and technology involved in all of these areas. And there can be tremendous bottlenecks and waste and productivity drags from billing, collections, dispute management, and cash application. So now let's kind of break it down a little bit. So when you're doing this let's keep it a little bit simple. And so let's look at invoice delivery, customer payment, and collections management. And so one of the first things, let me step back even further than that. Let's start to look at our customer relationship management. So when we're onboarding a customer, so that's tremendously important as well. So we want to make that process as seamless as possible. And so you want to look at how long that takes, what's going on. So that's incredibly important. So one of the things that we want to do with our customers is we want to eliminate asymmetry of information, not only between our internal teams in AR and sales, but also with our customers as well. And so at the end of the day, there's no need to overcomplicate the first step. And so the automated invoice and statement delivery allows streamlined billing. And so really what you want to do is you want to work with your customers. We call it the electronification of payment. So we really start to see that the electronic exchange of information is incredibly valuable. And one of the things which I often talk about is that people still like to write checks. And on my side, I kind of like to receive checks because back in the day, we couldn't get that remittance information. And so what we want to do is we want to transition away from checks because we can actually get that remittance information electronically, and we can have more control over when we're getting paid. And the cash application is actually much more efficient than dealing with lockbox, and we can lose those lockbox fees as well. And so that's really the first step. So again, take that look into your process, map it out. Those of you who had the joy of going through Sarbanes-Oxley many years ago, you can actually use a lot of those diagrams now. You might want to work with internal audit. The good news is that once you really put this effort in, it's something that you can continually go back to. Yes, you have to update it. I did a comprehensive cash flow analysis. This was probably back in the late 1990s, with every single cash flow movement, AR, AP, Treasury system all across the world. And last I heard, it was like 2015, and they were still using what I did, just building off it. And so this investment is incredibly valuable for you to do. In really terms of benchmarking, again, where you are and then where you need to go, and also make sure that you have that visibility that you need into the processes and things impacting them and those drivers of success, in creating that process culture of continuous improvement. And then on the customer payment side. And so really what we need to do is we need to understand, are we getting paid on time? Are we getting paid within the terms, right? What are our terms? Do our terms make sense? We need to make sure there's alignment there. What is the cost of extending those terms? Does our sales team understand that? Are there incentives aligned with not just pushing sales, right, that are low margin sales? And what are the actions that are causing delays in customer payment? And so do we have visibility into some sort of trends? Do we have communication open with the salesperson? So sometimes it might be better to go through the salesperson and say, hey, do you know if there's something going on at company X? Their payments are late. And so that's more of a softball thing. As a courtesy, I'll reach out. Some sales guys won't like to do that. I think they should. It's part of the relationship. You can't always be the hero. And so let's make sure that, if nothing else, that when our sales guys are communicating, we can let our sales guys feel like they're the advocate for those. And so we want to make sure we get that payment in, make sure we're making it easy. We want to remove that friction. So we'd like those electronic payments. Is it easy to pay? If we're going to take those electronic payments and those credit cards and take those hits, let's make sure we understand what those are and do those in a mindful way. And then for the collections management, so we need to have that visibility. How do we manage the late payments, our invoice disputes? And so just on the collections management side, what I see and what I've learned is finding out how many hours are spent on the phone with these invoice disputes. There's no visibility. There seems to be the same disputes being had over and over, so there's no ability to recognize those patterns. We need to be able to look at the metrics on what's the cause of those, how efficiently are they being resolved, are there best practices that we can share. And then we also need to look at our collection methods. So we need to look at maybe some less traditional collection methods rather than just dunning emails, boom, boom, boom. There's a lot of technology out there. There's actually a lot going on in the arena of artificial intelligence, where we're actually learning what's the best type of communication. And so we also need to look at what's given us the most value for our time. And so we want to mitigate that bad debt write-off, but there are times that our experience is going to tell us that we're going to, just going to go ahead and have to write that off, and then we'll have to look at improving our credit review process. And so a lot going on there, but just really you need to evaluate your process. And as I said before, as you're evaluating that process, it's really important that we look at metrics, right? We need to be able to start somewhere. We need to have that comparison of those metrics. And so I talk a lot about metrics, and other webinars focus on AR done right. So we want to look at some macro level metrics, which have a different consumer base of information, and then we get down to those more micro level metrics, but we need to kind of put a stake in the ground. And so some common metrics that, of course, I know you've all seen, DSO, DDO, bad debt write-offs, more of my treasury background, cash projection accuracy, and then more macro cost of AR operation. And so these are more overarching issues that are absolutely important, really directly related to our financial statements, things that help our executives and leaders really ask the right questions. And so these are important things that we can benchmark more easily now across industries and across ourselves over time. When I was in Treasury, we had a hard time getting metrics. Now, a lot of even your AR automation providers will offer you some outstanding metrics, and I'll share some metrics with you in a little bit. So along those lines, let me go ahead and launch our first polling question. And so just wanting to get your thoughts on what you consider which is the most important to track at your company. Is it DDO, DSO, bad debt write-offs? Is it cost of AR operations, or are you of the opinion? So which of those four do you think is most important to track? I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. For those of you interested in receiving CTP credits, you will need to answer all of our polling questions here today. Just want to remind you, if you have any questions about CTP credits or would like a copy of today's presentation, please send an email to me at ernie@treasurywebinars.com. I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds. Then we'll take a quick peek at the results, and then I'll go ahead and share some of the results from previous polling questions that I've had over the past year in terms of the exact same question that I've asked to webinar attendees. And then we'll start to talk about some of the metrics, some AR metrics, macro level where you can get those. Then we'll touch on more of the what I call the micro level metrics. So you really need to be able to use that. Benchmarking is incredibly important. And again, there's a lot more resources out there to make sure that you are comparing apples to apples. So let's go ahead and close the polling question. Let's go ahead and share the results. I know no one is probably too surprised that we see DSO up there, and that's not a bad thing. And so it's kind of some of it is really a historical thing, but I think that all of these metrics are incredibly important, and all of these metrics they identify areas which you want them to go in the up or down the right direction. And so I think they all offer opportunities for us to improve and benchmark how we're doing. But I think it's very important that in this era that we call big data, that if we have this information, we don't want to micromanage to every single metrics that we have, but if it's easy to get the data, and it's something that we can impact. So one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to incent actions, right, that move us in the right direction, something that decreases our bad debt write-off. Did we invest in technology? How are we doing on those metrics? So thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to answer the question. Previous times I put in all the above are important, and that's what a lot of people took, but just with a grain of salt, DSO still seems to be what we're seeing. We're also seeing a little bit more of a shift in the cost of AR operations, which is a more macro level metric, which is important because if that's getting the CEO's attention, especially as you grow and grow across borders, this number will continue to go up, especially if you're doing acquisitions. And so at the end of the day, there's times when we need to get the CFO's attention. One way to do that is through the cost of AR operations, of course. But one of the things that, again, I pointed out, when you start to dial in on AR, the productivity impact, time spent on strategic activities, that's where you'll see that AR done right impacts that top line, that growth line, removes that productivity drag in addition to lowering those costs and lowering those bad debt write-offs. And also, it will impact the customer experience, the survey data that you have for the customer experience. It will make that impact, which will, again, help fuel that growth. So let's take a look at some macro level AR metrics, which are courtesy of my friends at APQC. So APQC is a fantastic research organization focused on best practices, not only in AR across Office of the CFO. I encourage you, if you want some really more micro metrics, they are a fantastic resource. And so just to give you kind of some flavor about what's out there, and just kind of the process that I would recommend that you go through when you're starting to look at areas assessing your AR operations. So we have, and this data is from, they have interactive AR receivable metrics, which are continually updating. And so there's hundreds and hundreds of observations here. They have a little bit more of a tilt towards maybe an enterprise-sized company, but there's definitely a lot of metrics that they have which are across company size and across industries. And so just interesting to see. You want to look at cost effectiveness. That's more of our AR costs, your DSO, your process efficiency, and your staff productivity. And so really what I like to show here is that, okay, it's important that you know where you're at, right? So let's say you're say in this cost effectiveness, you're $20 here, and you see top performers are $3.93. Well, you have to understand how to build that cost up, of course, but just look how much room there is, right? You start to see how much room they have. We might not be cost effective for us to get to 4, but we can certainly get to 10. So that's $10 per receipt. How many receipts do you get, right? It gives you that ROI. What about your DSO? This is amazing to me. You're losing 18 days there. So what's the value to you, right? What's your company's cost of capital? If you are a net borrower, this is incredibly an important metric. Then you can look at your process efficiency. I like to look at the FTEs, but I'm not really in love with the FTE metrics, because what I like to look at, what I'd like to see is more of a productivity. I'd like us to focus on a productivity measure, and we certainly want to focus on the number of receipts processed, but I like to look at things such as dispute resolution, right? And dispute resolution by type. So let's go ahead and hit you up with another polling question here. Just want to get a sense before we dive into technology where you might be in terms of automating AR at your company. Maybe you're just at the discovery phase, you're currently evaluating solutions, you have a short list, you're implementing, or you already have something in process, or you might not know at this time. Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Again, those of you interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions and also remain online for the duration of the webinar and answer all of the survey questions. Again, I sincerely appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. And so let me go ahead and keep the polling question just for a few more seconds, then we'll take a quick peek at the results. And so as we start to close up on our discussion on how to assess your AR process, we're going to take a look at some of the worst practices. So we want to get people thinking, right, these red flags. So you want to, if you're in Treasury, you might want to, hey, I was on this webinar about accounts receivable done right. It's really interesting what's going on. What are the pain points that you guys face? What are things that we could do to help you improve? And some of these things you'll start to say, so this might be the thing you're like, whoa, this happens at our companies. This really gives me the incentive to really look at investing in AR related technology and best practices. So let's go ahead and close the polling question. Let's go ahead and share the results just to give us a flavor. And so just starting the discovery phase, currently evaluating, have your short list, and you don't know. So I think we're spot on there. So with the majority of the content here, so hopefully I'm giving you incentive to really look into the ROI of AR done right at your company, and maybe I've helped you think about what AR done right really means. What's the opportunity? How do I assess where I'm at? What's out there and we'll talk about what's out there in terms of technology and process and best practices. What are the questions that I need to ask internally? How do I make my business case? So there's so much that you can learn. Those of you that are implementing or already have that solution in place, I encourage you to really think about the value that you're getting out of this. And so as I start to talk about, I'll talk about 10 ways that AR done right impacts the bottom line, and you should go back to your solution provider and challenge them and look internally and say, I should be getting all these benefits. Or if you're looking for that provider, are you going to be able to help me do all these things? How do we measure it? How do I monitor that? And how do I communicate that? So thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to answer our polling question here today. So this is kind of fun to look at things, get a little humor in a webinar. Wouldn't that be nice? And so here are things that are just kind of red flags, especially if you're not really directly involved in AR, things that you think about, things that you see, things that you observe. And some of the thing is AR does deserve your attention. Sometimes you have to convince yourself, the CFO, the treasurer. So you look at your DSO, right? So really, if you're a net borrower, you start to look at that. And so you start to look at what is our DSO? Is that going the wrong way? What is our DSO versus our benchmarks in our industry? And then talk to Treasury, how much is that costing you? And so your DSO is impressive, but it's impressive the wrong way, right? I call that kind of what I call the worst practice. So we want to make sure our DSO is ahead of industry standards and really helps us. And if we're going to push those days out, we need to make sure that we're driving high margin growth. And then if your AR team is experts at printing, entering, sorting, and folding, then Houston, you have a problem. Actually, I was just in Houston, visited the Space Center. It was really cool. But you want to make sure that look at what are the amount of manual tasks being done? What's the amount of paper, right, that's going back and forth? And so when you start to get more visibility, when you look at those processes, and when you start to see the manual processing, obviously you think technology, right? It's 2020 now. We have to be able to do better, and that's where we see this tremendous productivity drag on so many levels, and especially in terms of data entry, data consistency, and data truth. And then a few more of our worst practices, the mailroom. And so again, we want to look at the electronification of invoices, and then the visibility, right? It's extremely important. AR visibility across all departments. Again, internally within AR collections, same thing, right? In some companies, but then you have to with sales and treasury, and so we need to have the visibility, and it's not into the pile of documents. It's available electronically. It's available in real time. We're able to communicate with each other effectively, whether it's across the U.S. or across international borders. And then you have to look at the customer experience, right? Is it hard to do business with your company? That sounds kind of common sense, but when you look at it, talk to your customers, right? Talk to your folks, talk to your customers maybe at a conference. So, or just maybe someone who's a customer, right? See what it's like to do business with your company, especially if you're not a high ticket dollar item. I used to do this at my company. I do a little mystery shopping on my own company, look at our processes, look at our payments, look at our relationships. That's very eye-opening. And then, of course, we talked about collections are managed with spreadsheets and sticky notes. And so we need to look at how we're managing our collections processes and make sure the friction there, the way that we're doing things, the tenor of our communications, why are we communicating, what are we doing it, where are we focusing our efforts. And so there's so many tools out there that are really cost effective. Looking at the sticky notes and spreadsheet, we need to be able to empower our AR professionals to be successful in what we're doing with giving them spreadsheets and making them doing things manually with sticky notes. We're actually putting a huge inherent barrier to success on our AR teams, and that's just not fair. So let me go ahead and touch on that topic a little bit. I love to talk about reporting and visibility. So just asking you to share with me how you generate reports to track credit and accounts receivable performance. Is the main tool used, is it spreadsheets? Is it third-party analytics solutions? Is it a BI tool? Is it a report generated from your ERP, or is it something that you do not track? Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Those of you interested in receiving CTP credits, you need to answer all of my polling questions here today. One of the things that we need to do is we need to make sure that our folks have the right technology to be successful. We're starting to see more traction away from spreadsheets, but I think some of the education that folks like myself can do is to get people to really take a look at the technology that's out there, and really even these back of the envelope calculations, it can make sense to you really quickly. There's a lot of back of the envelope calculators out there on websites like my strategic partner Esker you can go take a look at. So let's go ahead and close the polling question. Let's take a quick peek here. And I am pleasantly surprised, I would say, that we're seeing a little bit, the spreadsheets is not the #1 answer. So reports generated from the ERP. I would say your ERP was not made to manage accounts receivable. And so it's really more of the best in breed. So what I like to tell folks is my AR solution is going to supercharge my ERP. You definitely are going to be using information, extracting, pulling, and pushing information, but there's a lot of value that can be gained from leveraging a solution in conjunction with your ERP tools. And so in some sense, I mean, for some things, there's nothing wrong with spreadsheets on some level. We can do a webinar about things that are wrong with spreadsheets, and some of the things that are wrong are just the things that people just don't know how to use them, mitigate risk. But I like to say, okay, what's the value from going from a spreadsheet to this analytical tool in terms of the time, time wasted, the risks that are going to be there, and then the productivity gain that we can have, which is going to be tremendous. And so thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to answer that polling question. So let's go ahead. A few more kind of worst practices, things think about. As you really start to cross borders, it really becomes a lot more complicated. There's international regulations, e-invoicing regulations, and if you're trying to track those manually on a spreadsheet, I have to say good luck. And kind of related to those, not necessarily e-invoicing, but just who you're allowed to sell to, especially in today's world, right? We have restrictions and sanctions. We want to make sure that we're not non-compliant with those, because those fines can be devastating to some companies. So how do you define AR success at your company? And so, yeah, I love this. What does it look like, right? So I'm talking about, what is AR? What's the greatest AR? What does it look like? So people ask me, what does success look like? And I used to get dumbfounded. My manager would say, what does success look like for you in 2020? I'd be like, that's a good question. And here's a really good way to look at, this is kind of where you want to go. And this is kind of the things that promote operational efficiency. So what are the things that we can do to impact operational efficiency? How do we leverage technology? We want fewer manual tasks. What is that? What does that result? Orders enter more quickly, reduced errors. We get hard dollar savings costs and we're efficient, less dollars on suppliers and equipment, documents, overtime, time management, a simplified IT environment. Here's one thing that we don't often talk about. Really, when you have the right technology partners, whether it's AR, AP, or Treasury, what you can do is you can actually lessen the burden on your IT staff. Wouldn't you love to go to your IT department and say, I really don't need your help anymore because we're doing this more effectively. You don't have to manage all these things. We're doing this in the cloud. You don't have to worry about software upgrades. And so we all know how hard it is to get IT support in the first place. But what happens if a file format breaks and you're trying to push data back and forth, especially if you're looking at something that might hold up an order? So that's incredibly valuable. And then this is obviously, this is where I think is important, your visibility and oversight, right? You have that access internally, right, across departments that matter into any order invoice. You can have customizable KPIs. You can get some dashboards, and then for our audit, internal audit and external, that complete audit trail. And so this is what success looks like, right? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the people that you need to make that happen, and we'll talk more about the technology. Again, the first thing you need to do is see, okay, where are we at? Let's look at this. Let's see what's driving our costs, what's driving our inefficiency. Okay, it's apparent that we're going to have to, have some gains on the operational front. So what does that look like? Technology, fewer manual tasks. How do we quantify that? We simplified our IT environment. Okay, there's a benefit to that. What's this? This sounds like your business case right here. And this is one pillar here. And this is an improved experience, which I love this slide because it not only talks about your customers, it talks about your staff. Would we like to make our staff more happy? What's going to make them more happy? When they're having a intellectual conversation, right, with your customers, not arguing about you're looking at the wrong number, you're looking at the wrong invoice, and then you're giving your staff more time to have strategic agility in their career. Again, we talked a lot about your soft dollar savings, but as you're eliminating these manual tasks that are mind-numbing, you can actually have higher staff retention. And then you also, as your experience improves for your customer, you're going to have lower customer churn as well. Your customers are going to be happier. What does that mean? Things that can make them happier are faster invoice dispute, self-service, orders delivered on time, and then just collaboration. I mean, it's an improved experience internally, right, to the internal customers you have with AR, including Treasury, right, and CFO, controller. And then you have a harmonization. You can harmonize. Notice I didn't say centralize. I said harmonize. So sometimes our subsidiaries have better practices, and we do it corporate. Believe it or not, let's harmonize though, and then we can have that accountability on an individual and team level. So that improved experience. And then my favorite term, I think, from last year I talked a lot about is business agility. Anything that promotes business agility is going to impact that top line growth. And so you're really going to be able to protect those growth opportunities, that given the fact that you're not going to have to worry about slowing down your operations because your systems can't keep up. And so the last thing we want to do is have our technology dictate our business practices. That is the worst case scenario for any business. Not worst case scenario for any business, but anyone who's in a support function at the business. You don't want to, in AR, you don't want to go tell the CEO, we can't do that because we can't collect payments, or we just can't do that. That's a career, that's a career-ending activity there. And then again, it helps us get new opportunities. Part of this is just we have more time to be strategic on all levels, and it's not just, it's people making approvals, so it's across the line of the office of the CFO. And as we are better at interacting more effectively with our customers, it's going to open up opportunities for new sales and business. Word gets out there, our reputation is going to be fantastic based on the customer experience. A lot of my strategic partners, including Esker, the reason that they all have really been leaders across the globe is their commitment to customer service, and that goes from every communication, that goes from AR. And if you can get your company to adopt that mentality, you're going to be amazed at the impact that has. All these things together, they really result in higher profits. And so you want to look at all the things that we're doing, right, to mitigate costs. We're going to mitigate DSO. So we're going to look at, everybody in finance likes to talk about we're saving money, but how about the productivity drag that we're taking away? So you kind of have to position it sometimes as, if we continue to do what we're doing now, this is what we're going to continue to do. We're going to lose money, bad debt, our customers are going to be mad. We have customer churn, our employees are mad. We have a high churn in AR because we have all these outdated practices. And so you can start to make those connections. I'm happy to help you make those connections in that business case if you want to talk after the webinar. And so here's a little piece which is a little bit different. I think it's important about assessing and managing your accounts receivable team. So when you look at AR success, you need to look at, make sure your team has the right skills for your company and what you're trying to do. Now, this isn't for everyone. I just love this because I spoke at a CIMA conference, and I think this really fits to almost any department in the office of the CFO. And so you start to look at the skills that matter for your team. You want to have a team with a diverse skill set. I encourage people to manage the skill set of their entire team on a top level. Make sure you have a portfolio, and then make sure that all of your team members can cross-train each other. So John might have tremendous digital skills, Mary might have leadership skills, so let's see how we can all cross-train each other to really come to a good level, but then you're going to have that expert in every level, and then hire people that you can learn from. That is incredibly beneficial, and you'll have accountability to their career, and they'll have accountability to yours. So we start with ethics, integrity, and professionalism. Obviously, that's incredibly important in the office of the CFO. But then I just love it. Let's keep it simple. Technical skills, leadership skills, people skills, business skills. And from my perspective, long time, I'm getting a little old. I can teach you technical skills. I can teach you digital skills. The things that are tougher to come by are leadership skills and people skills. And those are things that are going to be more important as technology continues to play a greater role. We're going to have to figure out how to collaborate together and leverage technology together and manage technology service providers together, right, and work together. And so that's incredible, and communicate with impact, right? So let's look at, here's skills and impact performance, just some food for thought for those of you managers, or those of you who might be looking to be managers. This is incredibly important. You got to ask yourself on AR success, what are the skills that matter most, right, for my team? How do you assess if you or not, your team has the skills, and then how do you decide whether to train up or bring new employees on board? And so these are skills that I think impact performance. This is a little general, office of the CFO, just things for you to think about. And the reason I put the number 1 and number 2 is I get called by recruiters all the time. I help source people in Treasury and finance, AR, AP, and this is what I hear is most important. Interpersonal skills, relationship building, effective communication, those trump almost everything. Analytical abilities can be up there. It just depends on the specific position. You have to do your blocking and tackling, problem solving, tech savvy, leadership, passion for learning, embrace change. That should be higher. So this one, if you have a passion for learning and you can embrace change, I'll hire you all day, every day. I think I can teach you. These things are just, sometimes that's inherent. And when people get the fact that that learning is not a chore, it's a way of life, it's incredibly, they're going to be successful. They embrace change, and then they need to have more of a business perspective. What are the competitive and regulatory dynamics? So again, kind of quick on that slide, happy to share with you the presentation, but these things are all important to your success. Your people are what drive your performance. You need to have the right people, the right environment, the right technology, the right process. And so just something from the same study, just kind of things that are more important in the digital world. So this is more of maybe a CFO, maybe a director of finance, but I think it can be extremely valuable in terms of AR, because I think technology is important. And so I think the more that we have that tech savvy acumen across the board in AR, I think we're going to deliver more value. So again, happy to share that with you. They have hyperlinks here. There's some great information from these studies that I that I share. And so we look at the skills gap analysis. It seems basic, but this is something you should go through. You're hopefully still going through your planning. Do this. If you haven't done it, think about you need to do it every year, maybe every quarter. You have to define the skills gap. So what skills do we need, right? What skills do we have to meet our departmental goals? Okay, people, if we need to train up, who do I need to get on board? Who do I need to redeploy? Do I need to engage internal, external people? Do I need to get a consultant? Technology systems, what are the gaps I have there that can help me bridge those gaps? And what are the processes that we have? So define what those skills gaps are, and then you need to decide what's the ROI. Are we going to train people up or maybe redeploy people from another department? And then just some really quick, some of the top skills gaps that are out there in the Office of the CFO, which I mentioned. You'll see that the soft skills and the ability to collaborate are up there. Business partners, CHIPS, business acumen, behavior leadership are skills gaps according to the CGMA study, digital and analytics, and then the technology side. And then this is a slide that I came up with. I'm not a graphic designer, but I really love this. If you're a manager, you're going to be a manager. I think this is incredibly important in any department. And so just giving you want to have AR success. This is what's going to drive it in 2020 and beyond. Culture is really the key, that accountability, right? You have to have value and ethics. You have to really push people on their personal growth, take ownership, that professional growth, support that, make them feel like they're valued, communicate feedback as constructive and honest, and also within your team, you need a positive environment. Now, here's where I always make this comment. A positive environment doesn't mean you don't have any disruptive employees. Disruptive employees are incredibly valuable. Now, there's a difference between disruptive and toxic. Disruptive is a person who has a lot of ideas, thinks outside of the box. So I encourage everyone to have at least one person on your team who others would classify as a bit disruptive. You have to have friction to move forward. Now, we all know what toxic is. We don't need toxic intention, but a disruptive influence is not something that's bad. It can help you really with the innovation you need. People need to understand their value to the company. What are they doing now? What do they want to do better? How can you help them move within the company or even out of your department? I used to encourage people, what do you want to do? You want to move to another department? That's fine with me. Let's get you where you want to go. Let's train you. And then this accountability. So I really think this is important. And then in terms of collaboration, internally and externally, let me go ahead and jump in here with a quick polling question. Just want to get your sense, just to get you thinking about this again. For your team, how would you characterize the overall state of the relationships with your AR and collections team with your customers? Would you say not good, poor communication, not good, but getting better, acceptable, good, communicate and collaborate effectively, and I don't know? I would also ask you to think about this question in terms of your AR. Do you work in silos? How are those internal relationships? So I wanted to leave this with you a little bit later in the presentation. I want you to think about this again, because it's incredibly important on the customer experience side. So let me go ahead and leave this polling question up a little bit shorter than I normally would to be mindful of our time. Then we'll go ahead and take a quick peek at the results, and then we'll move on to our content. Let's go ahead and I'll share the results real quick. And so I'm glad to see that 31% of you, it's good, you communicate and collaborate effectively. Those of you who are willing, I'd love for you to share with me exactly how you make that happen. I always love to share those best practices. So the rest of us, we have work to do, even though we are acceptable. What can we do to get better? And there's a pretty big number in I don't know. So I think that speaks to me, and I see it as that's me. I need to do a better job, and our managers need to do a better job, and the CFOs need to do a better job. And really, communicating the impact that AR has with the customer experience. And so those of you that don't know, I would encourage you to find out. And hopefully after this webinar is over, I'll give you some ideas how to either have conversations with folks that are directly facing your customers and really just kind of ask, just get the lay of the land. How are we communicating now? What's the tenor? What's the tone? What's the frequency? Is somebody looking at these communications? Or our sales guys seeing these communications from AR? It can be incredibly eye-opening. It might be a little scary for some of you, but it's something that could really could need your attention. Like, you don't know what you don't know, right? So let's talk a little bit more about AR and the customer experience. So this is something that I think is a grid slide to print out. AR actions and interactions that impact customer relationship. Each interaction with your customer matters. The tone of each interaction matters. We need that visibility with interactions across departments. We need the ability to manage disputes in one place, right? We only want necessary communication. And then we need to understand that supporting AP professionals at our customer improves our company's AR efficiency and effectiveness. And so when we're communicating with our customers, we have to make this a win-win situation. So work with me, work with me. What do you know? We're going to make your AP more efficient. I'm going to make you look good. I'm going to help you with your career. Wow, that's pretty exciting. And then when you're collaborating with your customers, again, you want to invest in understanding the AP challenges of your customer, because sometimes AR done right at your company can help them do AP better. They need to understand the benefits of electronic information exchange if they're not doing that. You can educate your customers on the value of electronic payments if they're not paying you electronically. You can work with them to identify opportunities for discounts or the timing of payments. And then you need to, again, probably too many times, but more efficient AR processing means more efficient AP processing for your customers. So let's make sure that we are taking all the opportunities, not only to not reach out to our customers and say, I want money, I want money, I want money. By the way, if we look at how we do business together, let's make it a frictionless process. And by the way, let's help you, let's help you reduce, right, some of the costs that you have on your end. And if we get electronic payments, we might be able to remove my lockbox. Boy, that would have been a dream come true for me. And so what about internal collaboration? So I've talked a lot about customers. And so these things can help facilitate a holistic approach to AR. Visibility into all order to cash related processes. Technology can facilitate this. Again, visibility into all customer interactions. We want to have the right dashboards. We want to understand, we don't want to send the same reports and metrics to every single person. We need to understand our consumers of information and get them the metrics that they need. We need to help them understand this metric impacts this driver of company success and help them understand in those relationships. That done right is a game changer. And then we want to collaborate with Treasury to understand the value of efficient cash application and electronic payments. Happy to have a much longer conversation with anyone, especially about the collaboration piece, which I've had a lot of conversations about. It is very important to me, and I think this is really an area where people are going to see more career success as they find that they have an acumen in this area and invest in developing that. And then, so let's talk about the role of technology. I like to say, okay, what does it look like? We say, what has it gone wrong? What has it done right? We're going to invest in technology, right? What's that happen? Our DSO is impressive. Our team is not members at experts at printing, so we've eliminated that. The mailroom is not our department's milestone. We have quick invoice delivery in any format, so we're showing you how basically a lot of this with technology, we're taking those worst practices into best practices. So we go from our visibility into the pile on the desk, into full tracking and reporting. We make self-service through an online portal, and then we have the clear collections are managed with spreadsheets and sticky notes. So just have a few AR automation case studies, just kind of show you some of the values, some of the pillars of the value proposition. So one case study is from a company called Trek. They're a privately owned corporation in Waterloo, Wisconsin. 16 international distribution centers, 5,000 independent bicycle dealers. So you have to, that just probably makes your mind spin, right? Treasury and AR people. So the challenges were they didn't have a standardized collections tool. Everyday tasks like sending reminders were done manually. They were just doing that manually. It was cumbersome, let alone if they were doing the right thing with the right tenor. They had no consistency. And then they had a really large amount of business coming abroad, which made things incredibly more difficult. When they invest in AR automation, they reduce the past due by 4%. Incredible productivity, their customer satisfaction, their DDO went down, improved collaboration, and enhanced visibility. And so they were able to really have a robust return on their investment. There's much more information on these case studies if you are interested in learning more. Just to give you a few things, hopefully we're hitting some of the industries you have, maybe some of the same challenges. Also, the Fireproof was a record center in Ohio. They were manually received approximately 1,700 accounts today. We're managing 1,700 accounts with a collection team of one or two, and their number of accounts was raising by 15 to 20 per month. So they needed to be able to to really handle the growth effectively, right? And so how are we managing that? So there was incredible amount of working capital pressure, amount of cash that was trapped. And so they were able to increase on-time payments, reduce their AR balance by 5 to 10%. I would imagine that's much higher now. And in their productivity, one of the things they saw there was they were able to move to electronic payments, and then that visibility and dashboard. And so now they had that visibility into those accounts, could set up reminders, could section those accounts into those high those high margin accounts, and so identify those trends. Again, many more case studies there. So just some closing thoughts and recommendations. So here we go. Here's your business case for AR done right. And again, if you already have a solution in place, let's make sure that you're getting all these value. All these are things that you're measuring and you're seeing value on, and that you're communicating this to the CFO and everyone else. So that ROI is the gift that keeps on giving. So AR automation removes manual processing and errors, lowers AR processing cost, mitigates time wasted internally on communicating within and across departments. You need to find out how much time your folks are spending, not only on the time with your customers, but across departments in AR and Treasury. AR automation will mitigate your bad debt write-offs as you improve those customer relationships, mitigates those disputes. I can't tell you how much time is spent. Some of the research I've seen, we want to remove asymmetry of information. That's low-hanging fruit, and improves the productivity of all those involved with processing receivables. More time on value-add activities. Again, see how much time you're spending after you do your implementation. Let's do that survey again. You'll be shocked. Improves the customer experience, lowers the AP processing cost for your customers, impacts great for your relationships. AR automation can eliminate the need for a lockbox-related fees, international lockbox. That's really fun. I've done that. AR automation improves forecasting of cash, improves working capital management, and helps us mitigate internal IT resources. Now, give me 5 minutes with any CFO in any country. I don't care how big it is. I'll go over those 3 pages with them, and I guarantee they're gonna want me to do more and ask me, well, what are we doing, right, in AR automation? Why aren't we doing this? Why can't we do this? And so my recommendations, which are important, I'm going to focus on this more this year. Define AR success, monitor and manage it. Have an in-depth understanding of your company's AR operations, people, process, technology. Invest in managing relationships within AR and with Treasury. Understand how to manage the impacts of AR, the actions that AR has on customer relationships. Invest in the right people with the right skills, and invest in the right technology. So these recommendations are incredibly important. Anyone wants to have a conversation about any of those topics in depth, please reach out to me. I just want to point out that Esker has some tremendous thought leadership resources, so I strongly encourage you to visit their website. They have some amazing just really quick hitters that can really make the business case for you and show you that AR definitely deserves your attention. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question as I have a few closing thoughts. I want to make sure that everyone is aware that Treasury Webinars, in collaboration with our lead sponsor, is going to be delivering the first ever Treasury and Finance virtual conference, April 21st to the 23rd. So we're going to do a full-blown virtual conference, everything that you can do at an online event and more. So if you want more information about that, you'll be able to let me know that on our post-webinar survey. Finally, I would like to once again thank our webinar partner today, Esker. Their strong commitment to thought leadership and their commitment to serving Treasury, Finance, AP, and AR professions is welcomed by us, and we sincerely appreciate that, and that's why we're proud to have them as a strategic partner of ours. So with that, I want to take the time to thank you once again, the audience, for your valuable time. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you very much, everyone. Make the rest of your day great.